The time of Sen will come to an end.
And the Clenshaw era is about to begin.
It's all change at the top.
But have the past 2 years been a success?
I'm Alex.
I'm Rob.
And this is the Walford Weekly Podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to Walford Weekly, your weekly EastEnders podcast, where on this extended episode of I Ain't One to Gossip, we are going to be talking about Jon Sen stepping down.
You know me, I ain't one to gossip.
Yes, indeedy. It has been announced that Jon Sen is moving on. In a article from the Metro by Duncan Lindsay, it has been said, it's all change at BBC Drama, with Holby City set to leave our screens. EastEnders boss Jon Sen is moving across to take the helm at Casualty, while Walford audiences will be meeting a new executive producer. BBC Studios has announced that Chris Clenshaw will become the executive producer for EastEnders. So, Alex, all change at the top. Now, the question on everybody's lips is when will that be happening, and what the thoughts on the past 2 years or so have been. I mean, what are your first thoughts to this news? Are you pleased? Are you excited? What are you thinking?
I say I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't be lying if I said that, because I'm not. I think whether it be through pressure, which I don't think it was. I think that Jon Sen perhaps always kind of saw himself doing it for this kind of period of time, 2-3 years. I think we've said before on the podcast that a term for an executive producer tends to be around about 3 years. It feels a little short to me, but then that might just be because it's some kind of like sweaty dream that we've been through this Jon Sen era recently, and it's just kind of like toned down slowly. And that's another thing, though, I've noticed. Yeah, a Senny dream. Something I've noticed is that, have you noticed that a lot of kind of Sen input kind of have been toned down as well, and like a lot of things that you would accredit to Jon Sen's era seems to have kind of slowly pitted out. And so another reason why I'm not too surprised.
Well, I see now. This is the big issue. This is the thought process, I think, of a lot of people. Is that what would you describe as a Sen input? What would you say has been sort of the moments that you would say that's a Jon Sen thing?
See, we've again talked about this before, where I've kind of given a criticism to Jon Sen, and you said, yeah, but there's people above Jon Sen. They're the people who are the ones who make the ultimate decision. Yes. But I think you have to remember that Jon Sen is the executive producer of the soap, so it does tend to be what he says goes. And I think Kate Oates would only kind of step in if she completely felt like it was going completely off kilter. So yes, there might be, if you haven't enjoyed Jon Sen's era very much, blame directed toward Kate Oates as well. If you have enjoyed it, then there's praise to be put toward Kate Oates as well. I would be very curious to know how others in the production feel as well with Jon Sen. But to answer your question, actually, what you initially posed, what has been Jon Sen's input? I think for a lot of people, it's been special effects, music playing unnecessarily, camera effects, filming effects. Some filming effects we must praise him for, though, because he's done a decent job making the environment of EastEnders looking busy whilst we had the COVID and the restricted filming as well. But I also feel like some decisions, I don't feel like there's ever been a moment where we've said, oh, this storyline has peaked for Jon Sen. There's not been a moment where this has been the pinnacle of Jon Sen's career, being EP of EastEnders. But what's your highs and lows? What do you think?
I mean, I think what I would agree with you there is saying that I think what his thing has been individual episodes have stood out. There have been moments of brilliance, like sort of in individual episodes, but I wonder whether that's sort of been the way that it's been done, as opposed to, weeks of excellence, where the stories have been amazing from start to finish. There's been episodes where, something like the Gray and Chantel story where Chantel died, excellent. Linda's alcoholism storyline, New Year's Eve, excellent. The New Year's Day episode of this year gone by with Mick and Kate and the confrontation between the woman who abused him, excellent. But, storylines this period have, to me, felt a little bit sort of on the conveyor belt, a little bit paint by numbers, maybe. Sort of... I see. The thing is, to me, a lot of people have said, you can just have a look online at the reaction to this news that Mr. Sen is leaving, to sort of garner the general response to it. And a few people have said, I've seen that he's damaged the show, and that the show is irreversibly damaged at this point. And I don't believe that for a second, because to me, a lot of the stories haven't meant a huge amount. I feel like there's been a few moments, obviously like Dennis's death, there's things that have actually things that will be taken going forwards. But, I feel like there's not a huge amount that's happened over the past 2 years that we will still be talking about in a few years' time. Like the Lucy Beale story, where we're still talking about that, and that,
of course,
heavily took the show in a different direction. I don't think there's anything that's been really about that. We've had discussions about whether Sharon, for example, has been damaged beyond repair as a character because of everything that went on with Ian. And I don't think that that's something that we'll still be discussing in 5 years' time. I think that will be just completely swept under the carpet. But, it's for me, it's not been all bad. As you mentioned, the COVID sort of productions afterwards, no soap has looked better since the COVID guidelines came in. I will fight that to the hilt. I think that the show has looked incredible on screen. I do. I think the show has looked incredible on screen.
No, I agree with you on that.
No show has looked busier. All the market scenes, I think the thing is to remember, Jon Sen is a director. And that's been very, very clear throughout his tenure. I think he's brought a lot of his directorial eye to the show. So, yeah, maybe the sound effects and music, which we have criticised openly and non-stop for the past 2 years. Maybe that will come to an end. Maybe it won't. I would gently remind you that before Kate Oates came to the BBC, she was in charge of Coronation Street, and there was this sort of malarkey going on in Coronation Street at the time. And you can ask the guys over at Conversation Street what their thoughts were on that, because I remember they were quite critical of what was happening to Coronation Street in terms of production stuff on screen around that time. So I wonder how much we're going to actually see changing over the next year or so. Worth pointing out also, I think, a lot of people might be a little bit confused about what the crossover period might be. Let me tell you now. Jon Sen was announced as the producer for the new producer for EastEnders on the 10th of December 2018. His first episode did not air until June 2019. So if you are expecting a dramatic shift in what we're seeing on screen for the next few months, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed, because we're not going to be seeing anything remotely related, I don't think, to Chris Clenshaw until way into the new year. Until I'd say probably mid 2022. So buckle up. We've still got a lot of this time to come, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Jon Sen has got a lot of stories to still wrap up. He's still got what seems to be obviously the Grey story still needs to be wrapped up. He's only just introduced a story with Harvey and his son and daughter, and the possibility of an extreme right wing story, So there's a lot of stories for him to wrap up. And as you say, Chris is going to obviously come in and do the transition period. It's like when you take up a new role in any job, you kind of come in and kind of shadow the last person who did the job and kind of go on with them. That's it. Clean out the bin. It's interesting for me to know, for us to know also that Chris, the new executive producer, had worked on the show prior as well as a storyliner, as a story editor, and as a story producer. So he's done his bread and butter. He's done his time on the show where and I think actually this feels to me like a good choice, because you tend to find that that executive producers who have been on the show and worked from the ground up and really cut their teeth on the show, the show is in their blood. The show feels like it's become part of them, and so they take care of the show. And I think that's another criticism that a few people have had with Jon Sen, and that is that he's kind of not really cared about the show, that it's not been something he particularly wants to put a lot of care into, because it's just for him a job, rather than a show that he liked, watched before he became executive producer, and may watch again afterwards. I mean, there's that old I can't say it verbatim, but one of the executive producers in the 90s basically said that the show is like a train set. You're given the train set to look after, to care for, to rebuild a few of the tracks, to give the show something so the next executive producer has something to play with. And I feel like Jon Sen's not done that. He's kind of left the show a little bit bare bones for the new executive producer to kind of fix and to sort out himself, which maybe he would prefer. Maybe he'd prefer to kind of start the show from the ground up again. But I just feel like Jon Sen, I mean, there's the example also that he killed off a lot of characters almost unnecessarily. There's obviously Kush. There was Jordan off screen. Still baffles me that they did that on the show. They killed off Jordan off screen. A perfectly usable character that could have come onto the show, especially where the Fox Hubbards are becoming quite a prominent storyline now and family on the show. They got rid of Mel, a legacy character with Hunter. It really kind of damaged any kind of like movement that could have moved forward with any other family. I mean, do you feel like Jon Sen took care of the show? Or do you think that he just knew he had 2 years, he wanted to make an impact, and now he's just kind of leaving it behind?
I don't think that he's been one of those executive producers that necessarily had EastEnders running through his veins. You look at the past. Look at someone like Dominic Treadwell Collins, who lived, breathed, and EastEnders all the way through. That guy knew EastEnders and loved the show. You might not have agreed with everything he did, but no one could deny that the guy had passion for the show. Jon Sen,
he had care for it.
Yeah. He polished that train set. He sort of, had his duster out. Jon Sen, I would argue, maybe didn't have that huge amount of love for the show. I don't know if Jon Sen had a massive amount of history with EastEnders before he came in. Obviously Chris has worked on the show before. Even the likes of Sean O'Connor worked on the show previously. So, in the words of Peggy, let it burn. Jon Sen, I think he's come in and he's done a job. All right. Whether a huge amount of passion has been necessarily deployed on screen is, up for debate. I'd argue that this era has been, I think my own analogy of what I would understand to have been paint by numbers has been basically the feel of the past couple of years. It's sort of just been factory line, keep the show running, there's a story, right, there's the next story, right, there's the next story, there's the next story, without it necessarily sort of doing much for anything. Again, it's not been all bad, though. I would argue that if you actually, it's very easy to criticise producers, and I would also argue that the last person that you ever want to discuss about a good producer is the fans, because the fans hate every single executive producer that's ever lived. I'd also ask you to look at the characters that have been brought in. Yeah, yes, he's killed, we've had a lot of death and we've had a lot of axings, we've had a lot of sort of unnecessary exits, but look at some of the entrances we've had. The Panasars, the Monroes, Zach, Frankie, all characters that we're actually really, really fond of, and there was an aspect of the Panasars that wasn't working. That's been rectified and was sorted, So, it could be argued it's not been all bad. The characters that have been brought in, I would argue, have been some of the best new characters that have been brought in for quite a while, So, I don't know. And of course, in this era, we've had the return of Janine. Janine's still a relatively new sort of toy in this era. So Chris has got Janine to play with when he first comes in. What a toy that is to play for a new producer to come into. Not every new executive producer has had that over the past 7 years. So it's like that for me. For me, the Jon Sen era has been an era of sort of it was. I wouldn't look at it as a particularly great period. I wouldn't look at it as an overly bad period, but I think more that way than that way. There's been good points, but there's been a lot of bad points. But what do you think?
Yeah. Well, with the characters that you were saying, so with the introduction of the Munros, the Panasars, do you think they're characters that will stay in the show once Chris has been introduced? What do you think Chris made? What do you think he may do now? You're right, actually, and that's a fair point, that a lot of new characters by Sen have been very good. His casting's actually been quite good too. But again, is it because that's the story he wanted to tell, so he had to introduce new families in order to tell it? So what's going to happen to them afterwards? Do they have a longevity through Chris's eyes?
Wow.
What other characters? I mean, there was also a big criticism that a few people have said that Jon Sen didn't utilise the Mitchells very well. I mean, I think the Mitchells were used fairly consistently during Jon Sen's
you'd argue differently, I would argue.
I mean, I think they were, whether they were used well, I'm not sure. My feelings of shenanigans is also a completely different argument in itself. But how do you think then the characters are going to be picked up, looked after by Chris? And do you think that Jon Sen did look after the characters that we had? So the Sharon, the Phil, the Ben and Callum. Did he look after them well enough when he was on the show too?
I mean, I think a lot of the characters are in a slightly different place to when, his era first arrived, I mean, think about 2 years. We had everything before the boat crash, so Denny was still alive, Sharon and Phil were together, Ian was, doing his own thing with the Beals, a lot of pieces on the EastEnders chessboard have been moved around in the past 2 years. Could they be moved back? Maybe so. The Panesars, for example, me and you have whinged and whined quite a lot for the past, especially the past year or so, saying that whilst we love the Panesars, we want to know the next part of them. The thing about this era that's really kind of irritated me more than anything else is that there's been a lot of threads dangling that we've been waiting to be pulled, and that have just never been. It's like, there's that, by the way, but you're not allowed to look at that. No, don't just ignore that. Yeah, I've put it there, but you're not allowed to look at it or know anything about it. And that's gone on for like months and months and months. Like, this whole thing about the history of the Panesars, for example. We know there was a house fire. We know that the dad is in prison. The Panesars have been in it for about 2 years now, and we still don't know that much more about their past than we did when they first came in. That's ridiculous. So, arguably, you've got a lot of interesting characters that have been brought in that can now be taken in a new direction. It's always very exciting when a new producer comes in. However, I think what you've also got to wonder is, yes, the characters on screen, they will go in a new direction, but as any new executive is prone to do, what axings might we have going forward? Do you think there are characters that are soon for the chop? That's the other thing, isn't it? Do you think there are any characters that are in danger moving forward?
The only family I can think of who might be in danger, and it's purely based on the fact that they're the newest, and I do think that there's only one story attached to them, and that's the Munros. That's the only one. That doesn't mean that I don't think that... I could go further with this, but then that would kind of spill my kind of theory of what's going to happen with Bobby. Okay. So I won't go any further with that. But I do think the Munros, if they're not taken off the show before, I think that Chris perhaps wouldn't really want to do much more with them, maybe. I think Vi potentially has a chop coming her way, because I'm sorry, but I just don't think that she's really done anything of interest on the show, particularly yet, but then she's running out of time now. I wonder if
she might die soon.
I'm sorry to say. It reminds me of what was it? Ted, Ted and I forget his wife
Joyce.
now. When they were introduced, Ted and Joyce, they were introduced, and then they got the chop literally as soon as the executive producer came.
Yeah, good.
I know, but still, I mean, it was a fairly decent decision, though, to be fair, because they really had nowhere else to go. I mean, it got to the point where Joyce was just turning up at the door, telling people she won bingo, and then leaving again, and that was basically her pay packet for that month.
Queen of bingo.
I wonder if the Taylors have anything more to give. Genuinely,
that's an interesting thing. Yeah,
because her family's just been debilitated.
Depleted.
She's got no one now.
Yeah.
Depleted. Sorry, debilitated. Yeah, depleted. Thank you. She's got no one now, though, has she? She's like lost. Mitch. She's only got Mitch left.
Yes.
So I wonder if Karen is next up.
But Keanu might come back.
I don't think. I don't think that's going to happen.
You don't think so?
I don't think the actor would want to. No. But again, that's just my theory.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the mainstays will be touched. I don't think Sharon will. I don't think Phil will. I don't think Ben or Callum will. I don't think the Foxes will be touched. What do you think? Maybe a mainstay will.
I think I see. I mean, the Ballum has been quite a big part of this era, haven't they? We would be dumb to deny it. That Ballum has been a very big chapter in the sort of Sen Oates era. The natural thing to do is to look at them as a popular couple, whether we like it or not, and to kind of take them onto their next chapter. So I don't think that will Ben and Callum, survive in terms of, where is Callum? I think Ben, as a character, he's the son of Phil Mitchell. There's always a place for the son of Phil Mitchell on the show. Callum, on the other hand, where could he be still in 5 years? Is there a potential for Callum to still be around? This is the sort of questions that a producer has to ask themselves when they look at every single character. You've got to say, can I still see you here? Do you still have a purpose in a year, 2 year, 3 years time? Where could your story possibly go? What more could we get out of your character? So I think it might be a little bit of a squeaky bum time for Balam fans, if you ask me. I wonder if...
Oh,
I do.
really?
I do wonder, but it remains to be seen.
I believe that a lot of comments will now be posted to us saying that if they were to get rid of Balam, then it would get rid of a lot of people watching the show. Do you feel that would be the case, or do you feel like a lot of people who would just it would be a bit of a meh for a moment and then kind of just move on?
I think you'd get over it.
I'm genuinely... I'm very curious about that. I'm very curious about that. I mean, that's something that... it would definitely be an interesting story if something should happen to Callum. But anyway, we're not the executive producers here. We're not the ones making the decisions.
We should be.
Here, are we?
It should be us. We should be talking about our appointments as executive producers.
What about the Carters? Do you think the Carters?
See now,
because they've kind of been.
Yeah, now see the Carters. I'd be interested to see them. I think the Carters, I think, has been proven that they work as a bigger unit. The whole point of the Carters is the family sort of. The more of them there are on screen, funnily enough, the more that unit tends to work, which is very strange to think. You'd think that it's very unique, actually. I think the Carters in that respect. There's very few families that I think, possibly other than the Mitchells, that the more there are on screen, the more sort of fulfilled I feel watching them as a unit. I think we might see the return of Lee. I think Lee would probably be back within the next few years. I would wonder if we might get a Johnny the Third, maybe. I don't know. Maybe a new Johnny might rear its head. Maybe that's why. A
new Johnny will be fine.
Yeah, new Johnny would be absolutely fine. Which again, he's had a history with Ben, so it's a temptation there to sort of revisit that. So. I don't think the Carters are going to be leaving the Vic. Would be an official prediction. I think they're going to just leave the Carters where they are for now. Maybe he might actually make plans to sort of cement Mick and Linda more together. Because I think he would have been around the time that the Carters first came in. So I think he would have been sort of around for the genesis of them and sort of knowing about what the point of them were, and the sort of, I don't think we will see any affairs for the Carters in the Clenshaw era. Officially prediction, but you never know. It's interesting. I think it's always exciting when a new executive producer starts. Whatever your thoughts are on the previous person, whether you loved the previous one or hated the previous person, it's always exciting to get a new creative mind in to sort of lead the ship in a new direction. So I'm excited, actually. Kate Oates officially will be taking over the reins of EastEnders for the next couple of months until Chris sort of sits in his big shiny office chair and starts firing people and hiring people from Walford.
That's interesting.
Oh, did you not know this?
That. So
yeah.
So there's going to be a transition with Kate Oates taking over.
Yes.
Because there was a huge argument for a little while that when Kate Oates kind of took over and had the helm before Jon Sen did, a lot of people actually really enjoyed the show and started saying, it's coming back to, it's quite good. So I wonder what that's going to feel like.
It is in this article. Yeah, BBC Studios head of continuing drama Kate Oates will oversee executive producer duties at Elstree on the show until Clenshaw joins EastEnders in January 2022. Wow. Now, again, I wouldn't get over it. I wouldn't get overboard excited about that because Christmas has already been filmed. Christmas has already been done. So that's all been done in the Sen era. And again, you've got to bear in mind, all this stuff is done months and months in advance. So all stories, scripts, filming, the months that Jon Sen has all been part of, that's still going to be on screen. I don't think we might see a few sort of visual things, and but nothing major is going to happen while Kate Oates is sort of doing this transition period. There's not going to be a period, no matter how fans might like to see it as, oh, it's great now. Yeah, you can tell he's left. You can tell he's left. Jon Sen's gone. Yeah,
Right.
Kate Oates is very much. That's not going to happen. All right, it's still going to be. I mean, the whole point, actually, to be fair, from executive producer, we and some other viewers are the only people that notice this sort of thing. We're the only ones that care. Most
That's
producers,
true. That's
most
true.
viewers of EastEnders click it on, watch it for half an hour, turn their brains off, and then go about their lives. It's only the saddos like us who sit and dissect every single little thing for hours and hours on end.
But I feel like a lot of people have noticed the show has kind of, and that's why this news feels a little bit more noted, a bit more like people are taking an interest of it. I think you're right. Normally when an executive producer steps down or comes in, it's not really something that makes the major news. And this feels like it has, because there's a lot of people who quite openly say that, like, I've stopped watching the show and it's been for the last kind of couple of years. And so I wonder, that's why I think this is, and also I feel that the way they've given this as a press release is almost like the BBC kind of saying, like, oh, look, fresh start. Look what's happening. Something new.
I don't know.
But I do think it's interesting. But it does not just discredit Jon Sen of just saying it's something new. So people who may have not been watching the show would then think, oh, okay, I'll give it another go. A bit like when they revamped the X Factor for the 100th time.
Yes.
And they said, oh, look, we've got a wheel and it tells you what's going to be this week's theme. It's like, they're doing it in order to allow people to kind of maybe reintroduce themselves to the soap a little bit. And I think that this is why they're making a bit more of a fanfare this time. But I do find it's interesting that I will be interested to see when the credit changes from Jon Sen to Kate Oates, executive producer.
If
they
it does.
they drop.
Because he will have executive produced everything that will be on screen up to that point. He still would have been.
Well, it'll be going until probably about February time,
at least. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. We'll see how the credits go. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, some people have been in touch, actually, on our Twitter and our Instagram and given their view about the Jon Sen leaving and the new executive producer. We're going to read them out. So, at Noir Forenoon has said, new blood on the executive producer front always comes with good and bad points, but it feels like the injection the show needs. Someone with fresh eyes who's not been worn down by the churning mill of the show yet. Someone who's been looking from the outside in and can see what it is and what isn't working. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Do you feel like... Do you feel like
such a fun job.
Yeah, but do you feel like Jon Sen has been, for lack of a better term, worn down? Because he's not... I mean, like you say, people have been quite vocal about his tenure on the show. I think he kind of not noticed it.
I mean, I think it's been a little bit style over substance in quite a few ways. I think we've gone from sort of sublime to ridiculous in some of the directions. I mean... Essentially, I'm ready for a change. That's I think the big thing. It feels right for the show to be going in a new direction now. I think, this has been done and it'll be interesting to see how much changes, and how much sort of, how noticeable the differences in story direction are. And I think also it will be interesting to see the direction, if much changes whilst Kate Oates is still sort of the head honcho in BBC drama. And whether it will still be noticeable, but how much input she had in the Sen era, I think has always been a sort of questionable thing.
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for Jon Sen in a weird way. Because it can't be nice. I think when we, sometimes we get a lot of people who don't like the show, and sometimes I can be a bit like, oh, I did try, I get what Sen, I get Sen might not feel so great.
No, I was going to say, yeah, that's a very, very good point. We get reviews now and again that will criticize what we said, and it just sort of, we love doing this. We love doing this podcast, and we love, talking to the fans and hearing what you've all got to say, and it's a great thing for us to do. But yeah, now and again we'll get someone who didn't like something that we said, and it does sort of make us feel, can you imagine that on the scale that being in charge of EastEnders does? Me and you would be. We'd be at our end. We'd be Valium every single week.
We have another comment from @Sharon's Janine, who has written, I will keep an open mind for Chris, of course. He seems to have been part of some good stories, but the fact he's been so involved with the show during the 2015 to 18 isn't so good of a selling point for me. But good luck to him. And I really mean that because I think he's going to need it. I mean, again, he was part of the Ruby story, wasn't he? The Consent Ruby story, which I thought was universally praised by a lot of
he
people.
seemed to have been around quite a lot during sort of the York second era, the year of Haley, as we call it.
Yeah.
So he would have been around. He would have been around for a lot of that. The Ruby Consent storyline, the knife crime thing, which I really enjoyed. With Shaquille's death and the funeral, with all sort of the real life victims. That was great. I don't know what his old job at Casualty was. I think he might have just been a producer, so not like sort of somebody who we could, if you're a fan of Casualty, you could automatically throw the blame or the praise at his door necessarily. So I don't know quite what we've got coming. Essentially, I wish him luck too, because it's difficult sometimes if a show isn't in its best condition in the views of the fans, it's very difficult to sort of polish it up and make it look good again. No, it's good. So yeah, I wish him all luck with that, because he might need it. But it's a brand new era for the show, and I'm excited about it.
Well, last thing then is that we ran a poll and we asked the fans of the show to let us know how they would rate Jon Sen's tenure as the executive producer of EastEnders. There was good, there was bad, and there was ugly. Do you want to hazard a guess which one won? And thank you to everyone who voted as well. You can find us at Walford Weekly on Twitter.
I'm going to guess it went ugly. Was it ugly?
It did go ugly. 61% of people said ugly, 25% said bad, and 14% said good. So he had his fans. He had his fans in the era. And like I said, there was no. I don't know. I don't think there was anything outright. Oh no! Actually, I retract that statement. I was going to say outright disastrous, but there was a couple of things.
No.
So I apologise. No. But yeah, good luck to Chris. Good luck to him, and we're really looking forward to seeing his episodes. Good luck to Kate, who's going to pick up the realms. The realms. It's going to pick up the reins at some point as well.
Game of Thrones.
And good luck to Jon Sen as well. I mean,
yes.
He gave it a sporting chance, and he had a go, and that's the main thing. Sometimes it's the taking part.
That could not have sounded more patronising if you tried. It's like you sound like you're praising a child for coming last in an egg and spoon race.
He gets a certificate.
He does, yeah. He gets to hang on his. To be fair, I've said what I've said about Jon Sen, and I think that there has been good in this era, which I think that people are always reluctant to say when you don't like a particular era. I mean, you try and get anything positive out of me about the Sean O'Connor era. It can't be done. It will not be done. You can't get anything out of me. I promise you that. But I will say, biggest point for me of Jon Sen is the fact that he kept that show going and looking as good as it does with all the COVID restrictions. 10 out of 10 for that, as far as I'm concerned. That was amazing. Go look at the other shows after COVID came in and tell me that EastEnders didn't do the best out of all of them. And that was purely down to the way that his directorial mind, I think, was a big part of that. Story-wise, yeah, not the best. It's not been the best. It's not been... The thing about EastEnders is one of the big things about it is it's the show everyone's talking about. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the truth during this past few years at all. So hopefully that can come to the forefront again. But you know what? For me, it's not been the worst era. It's not been the best era, but it's not been the worst era. I know Ben, from our colleague Ben, and Alex's partner, is currently drunk for a celebration. He's been drinking champagne for the past 6 hours, so he's now unconscious on the living room floor.
I would encourage people to get in touch with us, to comment below if you're watching this on YouTube, and let us know what your grades are. And the man who has all the information will tell you it right now, and that is Rob.
You can contact us on Twitter and Instagram at Walford Weekly. You can find us on Facebook at Walford Weekly Podcast. If you're just on YouTube, don't forget to like and click the notifications to get our spoiler video sent straight to your phone. And you can contact us on robwalfordweekly@gmail.com or at alexwalfordweekly@gmail.com. Now then, one more day and then we'll be back for another episode of Walford Weekly talking about the week that's just gone on. All under the Era of Sen. So until Sunday, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Laters. Bye.